This is another episode of Spade Talk, where out-of-the-box thinkers and executors get together for a value-driven conversation. Today, I'm joined with Zander. How you doing, man?
Good, man. I can't complain.
Great. It's an honor to have you here, and I want for the viewers to understand you a little bit more. What's your backstory?
So, I mean, specifically, what do you want to hear specifically? Where do you want me to come from?
So, talk a little bit about where you were before COVID,
Okay.
right? And then pretty much where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, for myself, I think during COVID, I was 23. So, I'm 26 right now. Right before COVID, I would say I was actually searching for something. Like, I was searching for what it was that I wanted to do as a career. So, I had a bunch of different school programs that I was a part of. I went to Humber for business. I went to Sheridan for electrical. And I did like a private IT course as well, all of which I dropped out of because I just didn't feel like it was for me. And I was searching for something. I didn't know what it was. I knew I wanted to do something with my life, but I didn't know what avenue that I would take it in. And so I was just in that exploration phase, reaching out, looking for different opportunity, attending different seminars, business events, meetings, summits. And then when COVID hit, I actually just got introduced to my industry. I went to go get my license to pretty much provide financial services to people that I know. And COVID hit, I want to say a week before I was supposed to go do my final exams. And so from April to August, I had to wait to do those exams. And by the time August came, I kind of lost the energy in wanting to pursue that career. I did get my license because, you start something, you want to finish it. But the excitement was gone, the drive was gone, and that was really it for me at that time. So that's kind of what happened during COVID. I moved out April of 2021, so a few months after. And at that point, it was just hustle mentality. So I started working at FedEx. I was driving trucks for about 16, 17 hours in the day there. I was doing like Skip the Dishes, Uber Eats, DoorDash, just hustling, trying to make ends meet for my rent. And yeah, man, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me specifically. And I continued to search. I worked at a couple sales jobs. I worked in the kitchen a couple times as well, too. It just wasn't enough. I'll honestly say that. So, yeah.
So where are you at now?
So currently I run a financial services firm. So that same license that I wanted to get back then, it's actually the license that I'm utilizing now. So pretty much being able to open up one of the fastest growing agencies in Ontario right now, and then looking to expand elsewhere as time goes by. But that's currently what's going on with me, bro.
So what are the biggest misconceptions about the financial services industry?
That's a pretty good question. Number one, I'd say people think you need to make a lot of money in order to save it or put it away. The saying goes, it's not about what you save, it's about what you keep. So I can tell you that I know a lot of people that are making good money that aren't able to save at the end of the month because they have bad habits. And then I can tell you people that are making minimum wage, but they're still able to save at least half of their income every single month. So it really comes down to, how much you keep and how much you retain, not how much you make. And I feel like there's a common misconception. People think they need to be wealthy in order to save money.
And do you think saving is the answer, though? Because of inflation, there's a few stories and articles that we'll get into later on. But in terms of savings, can people really save their way to success?
It depends on the environment that you put the money in specifically. I'm not going to sit here and give a lecture on where people should put their money right now. But you want to get behind finding somebody that's a professional and them having that education to pour into you so that you know where your money is going to go.
Absolutely. So what I was getting at was really the saving versus investing, right, conversation. And because I've found that through my experience as a business owner, entrepreneur, I've done it all under the sun as well, is that with, the rise in costs and everything that's going on, especially in the Canada and the US right now, can't really speak on too much of what's going on in the outer world, but it's getting harder and harder for people to save, even if they're financially smart, right? So just right off the bat, what would you say are like 3 tips that you can give people so that they can start attacking kind of like the financial world and struggles that we live in?
Okay. Number one, I would say find something that can provide adequate cash flow. So something where you're able to at least have some sort of money coming in on an ongoing basis and it's consistent. Number two, I would say find somebody that's a pro so that they can educate you on where to put it. So for example, like, you know, if you wanted to go get a haircut, you'd go to a barber. If you want to go get your car fixed, you go to a mechanic. So when it comes to finances, go to a professional in the financial services industry so that they can kind of, you know, help you out. And number three, I would say understand your risk tolerance. So, you know, you'll see things online with people saying you should put money here, you should put money there. But oftentimes you don't know how risky that environment is. And if you're a risky person, that's okay. That's fine. Put your money there. But you have to identify kind of where your risk is, and then you can determine where you should put your money at the end of the day.
Okay. So we'll come back and circle to the financial aspect of this conversation, but I want to know Zander outside of the office, right? Like, what are some of like the things that you like to do when you're not working?
That's a good question. I actually never get that one. I enjoy playing basketball. I try my best to find a basketball run, no matter whether it's a league, whether it's just runs every Sunday. I play runs with some of my boys. I enjoy playing video games. Often people don't believe me when I say it. I like Call of Duty. I'll be completely transparent on that. I enjoy audiobooks. Don't really like reading. I'll be completely transparent on that as well. I feel like my attention span is very weak sometimes. So opening up a book and ideally, you know, staying on topic is very difficult for me. If I can pull up the audio on like Spotify or Apple Music or something while I'm like doing groceries, you know, going for a walk, then that's something that works out for me too. So
Audiobooks are such a hack. I've only ever gotten into them recently, but it's a way where you can get through books faster. I always thought like, all right, the average CEO reads, they say 4 to 5 books a month. Yeah. Like, how do they have the time to do all of that? But the hack is audiobooks, right? You put that on 1.5x speed, 2x. You get through a book in a day, 2 days, easy. And it's really about studying the book. What's the last audiobook that you read?
Outwitting the Devil.
I've read that as well.
Bro, it's even in the beginning portion of the book, there's this message that he states. I don't remember exactly what he says, but he says, because it's such a book of conviction and it's so real, you feel it. So I remember the first time that I listened to it, I literally got chills. I actually stopped the audio for a bit and I went back to listen to it the next day. But it was very enlightening, and it kind of showed me how the world works in terms of, you know, I don't know if you know, people that are watching are religious or spiritual, but it kind of just shows you that everything comes down to the spiritual aspect of things.
Yeah. And for the people that don't know, Outwitting the Devil is a book by Napoleon Hill, the same author that wrote Think and Grow Rich. I think it's one of his sleeper books. What were your biggest takeaways from that?
The biggest takeaway I would say I have from that book would be understanding that negativity and opposition is in the mind. So oftentimes, and again, not to get too spiritual because I don't know who's watching, but I'll say it like it is. Oftentimes we refer to negativity as the devil. And in that book, they state that the devil's actually, it's real, but only if your mind believes that it is. And the actions and the negativity that follows what's in your mind is what determines if that's real or not. So if you have a strong mindset on the positive side of things, you're limiting the amount of access that opposition can have to you. So once you have like a sound mind, like a solid mindset, it's very hard for those things to enter into your realm. That's 1,000% my biggest takeaway there.
Okay. That's amazing. So I want to talk about pretty much your efficiency. You've been an individual that I've seen outside looking in, hustling, doing a lot of big things and accomplishing a lot in the last year, I would say, right? So what I want to know is, what do you do outside of the office, like in terms of development, to maximize your productivity in the office?
Number one would be physical activity. So like specifically for myself, I mean, you didn't see me about 2 months ago, but I actually put on a lot of weight. I put on maybe 25 pounds within the last year and some change. And so I reached out to a couple of my friends to help me out to get back to, what I'm used to. And I actually ended up losing like 25. I don't remember. I don't know what I'm at right now. I think I'm at 210. So becoming physically active in the gym and just playing sports in general, it helps with my mind. One thing that stands out to me is like when you're working out in the gym or you're doing any type of physical activity, you're going through something that's painful and it's hard. So when you prioritize that, when you then have issues within your day that are painful and hard, it's not as painful and hard because you already went through it at the beginning of the day. So I feel like you're preparing your mindset you just have a better mental capacity when it comes to life hitting you. For myself, it's staying around good people. It's easy to do, but easier not to. People say, watch your surroundings. I think it plays a big part. And so if I know that, for example, I have like a big day coming up tomorrow, I won't talk to certain people because I know that their energy may kind of drain me a little bit. I'll prioritize and decide when I want to talk to who. And
you got to outwit the devil.
There you go. There you go. So that's that in a nutshell. Like I don't really have a specific routine or ritual just as yet. But if I were to talk about it, it would be those two things for sure.
Those are two of the main drivers, I believe, for success. I hate seeing people give up their physical health for financial success. I don't think that trade-off is beneficial whatsoever. And like you said, the body holds so much stress, anxiety, tension. If there is no release for that, then you're going to find yourself when you're sitting down doing the work frustrated, anxious. And yeah, I believe like physical health is really a representation of what's going on in the mind. And so a lot of times you can put the Band-Aid on it for a while you're hustling, grinding. You might have some success in your career, but you find that a lot of other things in your life are in shambles. So I'm glad that you took that step in there. So I want to kind of pivot back into the financial services aspect of things. And personally, I never grew up with financial literacy. I also never grew up with any advantages, in terms of knowledge or access or any of these things. So over the last few years, being enlightened in a sense has really changed the game for me, my family, and knowing what I'm going to do for my future family as well. How has learning about like the financial industry, these different financial hacks, being in it, helping others, but ultimately the knowledge for yourself, how has that changed the trajectory in which you're going?
That's a good question. It's actually a question that I've never really gotten before. I think the number one thing that people that are in finance struggle with is the fact that we are helping other people, but sometimes we often forget to take that advice for ourselves as well. So to be completely transparent with you, my first year in business, I wasn't necessarily practicing as much as I was preaching. And so I got into a rut myself personally, and I had to kind of step back and reevaluate and say, okay, listen, if you're going to be preaching this stuff, you got to ideally practice it first. You got to live by example. And at first, I would say for me, I got really down on myself because I was new to business. I thought that business would kind of always be up and you'll never have downs. But for myself, I realized that I needed to start pretty much just practicing ideally what it is that I'm telling people to do. And so for now, what I can say is the advice that I'm receiving, I look at it as like future generations. Like one day I do believe I will have children. So like giving them that knowledge, but from a young age. I decided to start learning about it when I was maybe 23 and older, but I would want my children to start learning when as early as they can speak, as early as they can read. So it's definitely changed how I view the future and generations to come. I know that I'm going to be that person to break those generational curses within my family.
Yeah, that's been a big topic of discussion the last few years, breaking the generational curse. I feel like it's thrown around a lot, where and a lot of people aren't really doing anything about it. And then also, I believe it's deeper than what most people talk about. Breaking the generational curse isn't just like, all right, I'm going to set up my family, my lineage with finances. It's a lot of the trauma, right? A lot of the disadvantages, a lot of the baggage that we carry, right? And then that's what's passed down, that because it's not necessarily the resources, it's the mentality, right? That's one thing I always stayed away from, people trying to put you in a box, even if it's the people that are closest to you, because a lot of times you need to break out of that to really see the world for what it is. They say the world's small, and it is in some ways, but it's so big in a lot of other ways too. And so I personally believe that it's also creating traditions. It's also, having these values, right, that you're going to pass down to your kids. So have you thought about having kids in the future?
100%, yeah.
How many kids you want?
Probably 3 max.
Oh, interesting.
And they got to be close in age. So like no more than like 2 to 3 years apart. Mm-hmm. It's like one and done. Once I do it, I don't want to like get back into it. My siblings are like 8 years older than me. So I feel like my parents, like they got out of it and then they got themselves right back in. For me, I want to kind of just do it, have them grow up together. And then, yeah, we all just kind of grow together.
Talk to me a little bit about your family. So what's your background?
Like where my family's from?
Yeah.
Trinidadian.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that, eh?
No. So your parents immigrated here?
Yeah. In 89, I believe it was, is when my mom and dad came down here. So, yeah.
Have you ever been back home?
Oh, yeah. At least 8 to 10 times, give or take. Yeah.
How is it? When was the last time you were back?
See, that's the thing. And some of my family members, they asked me, like, why aren't you coming back? It's been since 2015. So, like, pre-COVID, obviously, things were a lot different. How is it back home? I mean, the food is amazing. Obviously, there's a lot of heat, beaches. The people are really nice. There is a lot of crime, but I think there's crime wherever you go. Like, I think you can't avoid it. It's really about who you know out there. But it's an amazing country. I definitely need to go back, like, within the next year or so.
Yeah, a lot of people, like, they know about Jamaica, right? They know about a couple other, islands in the Caribbean, but Trinidad and, like, Guyana and all of that haven't been, but know a lot of good people from there. Yeah. That's good. But you're out here grinding. Like, I've actually, because I've been blessed to be able to travel quite a bit, and then when you build your life where you have a bit of freedom, right, and flexibility to do these things, you start getting like the paradox of choice. Should I be here? Should I be there? And personally, I can be anywhere. I can kind of situate myself in that space. But in order to like achieve your goals, sometimes you got to just hunker down, right, set the foundation, work, and it's all like on a goal-to-goal capacity, right, type basis. But yeah, where are some places that you've been over the last few years that have inspired you?
I went to the United Kingdom back in May of this year. Now, to say, did it inspire me? I wouldn't say it inspired me. I think it made me grateful at the fact that I can experience different parts of the world. So I believe they're 6 hours ahead. I don't remember 6 hours.
Yeah, I believe so. 5 to 6 hours.
Something along those lines. So just appreciating like the aspect of like here it's daytime, back home it's nighttime. Just something as simple as that. The weather change, the way that they dress. I find in the United Kingdom, they walk everywhere. So I guarantee you, I probably saw no more than 2 or 3 fat people out there.
You got your steps in.
Yeah, I got my steps in. Like to the point where like my feet were, I think one day I did about 14,000 steps in that day. We were hiking up and down in the trails, the hills. So yeah, appreciative of it. I mean, would I go back? I think for like maybe a soccer game, but it's not my cup of tea in terms of like the food that they eat. I like their lifestyle though. I feel like they're up very, very early. They go to bed at a pretty decent time and they're just on the go. Like they're just going. They're going to work. They're on a jog. And it's a variety of people as well too. So I'm appreciative of kind of like the little things when it comes to that trip.
Mm-hmm. Any places that you looking forward to visiting?
I really want to go to Colombia. Like, that's a place that I've heard a lot about. I have a couple Colombian friends as well. The food's pretty nice.
Yeah, I heard it gets
have you
crazy, and I haven't been, but I have some friends that have been to Colombia, and yeah, I heard it's pretty crazy.
Oh,
down
yeah,
there.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I feel you. There's a lot of also beauty there, right? Couple different cities as well, and you get like a different vibe from each city. But yeah, man, that's definitely interesting. So, what are some goals that you have like right now? Anything that you'd like to share?
One thing that I want to do that's not necessarily a huge goal, but it's something that I want for myself is I want to move out into a condo. Reason why is because when I was living at home, I was living in the basement. Then when I moved out to a basement apartment. So I've been in a basement for the last 7 years, 7 years or so. So my goal for the next 6 months is to move to a condo, because I found that I've gone to like my friends' condos and I'm appreciative of the natural light that comes in.
Yeah.
And like, again, somebody that's living in a condo for years, they're probably like, oh, it's a regular day. For myself, when you're in a basement, you don't get that light unless you go outside. So just having that natural light come in, I feel like it'll flourish. It'll allow better thoughts to flourish, a little bit more of a creative mind because you're a little bit higher up in the sky. So that's my goal for like the next 6 months, I would say.
Okay, bro. So there's talks of a recession that's coming to Canada, the West. A lot of people say that we're already in a recession. What's your take on that?
I believe, like the last statement that you made, I believe that we already are in a recession and it just hasn't been advertised yet. I believe the actual definition of a recession is 3 negative quarters. I believe it is.
Yeah, it's only 2.
It's 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 2. And I mean,
that was like 2 years ago,
yeah,
right?
bro. So it just hasn't been advertised, I believe.
Yeah. So there's an article here by the Financial Post. It says Canadians should brace for recession because odds are not zero. And this is by Stephen Polots, former Bank of Canada governor, right? So what he essentially talks about in this article is that the unemployment rate, it went from 6.4% in June and is up to 6.6%. So we're hovering around the all-time high for unemployment in Canada, which is actually a pretty crazy thing. So in terms of being in the financial services industry, with this, recession that maybe we're in one, they haven't announced it, maybe they're delaying it as much as possible. Like, what would you say to the people that are concerned about a market crash like coming?
One thing that I will say genuinely is to find yourself in a position where you can get into some form of entrepreneurship. Now, it's easier said than done oftentimes. You got to look for the opportunity. You got to trust people that are within the industry as well too. But if you can find yourself in some sort of ownership, or if you can actually partner up with somebody that owns something, that makes it a little bit easier. So now you don't necessarily have to rely on like an employer to pay you, and you can rely on whatever business tactic you need. That's what I would say for the cash flow aspect of things and making money. In terms of having the money and putting it somewhere, I would strongly recommend individuals putting their investments into tax-free environments. So that can look like a permanent life insurance policy, for example. That can look like a simple tax-free savings account, but having money stored away where it has a potential to grow, but then it's also could be utilized for an emergency fund at the same time.
Okay, can we get into some of the financial services products that you had just mentioned? Because a lot of the audience, people that's out there, population in general, they don't really know about, a lot of these, services, products, hacks that you pretty much specialize in. So for, somebody, they walk into your office, give you a call, and they want to know, all right, what are some things I can do right now in Canada? And what are the products that are out there that I can take advantage of?
1,000%. I think bare minimum, an individual needs to be properly protected. Like bare minimum, there's a lot of laws and stipulations and rules that when you, God forbid, pass away or there's some sort of financial turmoil, there's laws and rules in place where that money that you've accumulated in whatever account isn't necessarily safe. However, if you have some sort of protection in place as an insurance, you can ideally utilize that money or rely on that money if need be. So I would strongly recommend permanent life insurance to individuals.
So what does that entail?
So how does permanent life insurance work?
Yes.
So pretty much when you get started with that life insurance policy, it's lasting until the day that you pass, whether it be 10 years, 15 years, or even 100 years. Now, not only does that act as a protection in case something were to happen, but it could also be utilized down the road as a long-term tax-sheltered investment. So you can utilize that for something like a down payment on a home, maybe even if you want to start up a business, maybe you have a little bit of debt that you want to pay off, you can utilize that life insurance policy to do so.
Okay, I think this is powerful. I purchased my first policy, right, like 2 years ago. You guys helped me out with that over here. But let's break it down a little bit more because I think it'll go over people's heads. So this is essentially an account, right, that you set up where you're putting money, right, into it depending on what your premium is, right, every month. But if anything were to happen to you, right, there is essentially a payout. Am I correct?
Exactly. Tax-free payout. Yeah.
And then so these monthly payments that I'm making, like say like 2 years from now, I want to buy a home or an emergency comes up or whatever the case may be. You're saying that I can take that money out and still have like that policy going, right? So it's a win-win situation.
Absolutely. So you have two options. You can pull the money out as if it were cash, like a bank, or you can borrow a loan up against the money in the policy.
Which is what most people do.
That's what most people do because that allows you to have the money on a tax-free basis. Now, let's say you're in a position where you can no longer pay that loan because a financial turmoil has come up. One thing that's guaranteed, we're all going to die one day. So God forbid, when that time comes, all the insurance policy is going to do is take the difference of what they would have paid out to your family. They'll take what they've owed, and then now your family can live on the rest on a tax-free basis.
Yeah, so it's pretty much a smarter, better way to save your money.
Ideally, it's
right.
Protected.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to say the word guaranteed when it comes to investments, but if you look at the track record,
of course,
it's performed very well over the course of the last 100 years. So I strongly recommend that as like bread and butter. If you don't have anything, at least have proper protection for yourself. Because, I mean, we've all been in a position where we've seen those GoFundMes on Instagram or Facebook where something happened to a family member and now ideally people have to raise funds in order to support that person being sent off. That's not necessarily fair to your family. If you know of something and you know that there's strategies out there to take care of that, utilize that so that your family doesn't have that burden of having to pay off whatever debt you may accumulate, you know, final expenses, funeral coverage, et cetera. Again, not something that we like to talk about because, I mean, it's not the sexiest thing. Let's be completely transparent, but it's reality. It's
but we're here for the uncomfortable conversations because these are the realest ones, right? And I'm the man in my household, and it's more so for the people around me than it is for me. But it's like I said, if you set it up the right way with professional, and obviously you do your fiduciary duty, pretty much I believe it's advantageous, right? So people can reach out to you or anybody else in the industry when it comes to that. Let's talk about some other products, right, that are out there. You mentioned tax-free savings account, which maybe some people are familiar with. How does someone go and open up a TFSA?
It depends on specifically what environment you'd want to put your money in. So oftentimes, first of all, a tax-free savings account, it's a TFSA. So the definition of that strategy is pretty self-explanatory. The money in there grows on a tax-free basis. You're able to pull it out. And there's a certain contribution limit per year, depending on your age, et cetera. Now, if you're in a position, and this is not a conversation to obviously bash the bank, because, I mean, I'm a customer and a client of the bank as well. But if you're looking to grow your money at a little bit of a faster rate or at more of a quicker pace, I should say, you'd want to look to open up a tax-free savings account with a private firm or somebody that is well versed in that industry specifically. Because depending on the license that an individual has, they can work alongside something called professional money managers. That professional money manager's job is to ideally take a look at the markets on a full-time basis to see where the money should go. The only unfortunate thing about the bank is oftentimes when you don't make a certain amount of money, maybe you don't have a certain credit score, they won't look your way. And instead, they'll actually offer you debt rather than a proper savings strategy. So in order to open up a tax-free savings account, yeah, you can open it up with the bank. Don't necessarily expect a lot of growth, if we're being completely honest. But you can also reach out to, again, another professional that can help you open up that account.
And what's an RRSP, and is it even a good product?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, any product that is saving your money and then allowing your money to grow is ideally a good product. Now, it depends on your risk. It depends on where you're putting the funds. RRSP is a registered retirement savings plan. Oftentimes, people use it for tax-free retirement, not knowing that there's tax implications when you go to pull that money out. So an RRSP is best utilized when you're looking to have tax deductions throughout the year, because you can make contributions to that plan and now have tax write-offs at the end of the year where you can then receive a refund. So would I say that an RRSP is a bad product? I wouldn't say that, but you got to know what you're using the money for and why there's vehicles in place.
Yeah, because, man, I learned this recently, maybe like a year ago, but the capital gains tax in Canada has now exceeded over 50%. So if you put some money into some stocks and it wasn't through a tax-free savings account or one of these products, right? The profit that you make, pretty much you get taxed over 50%, 50 to 60%. So half of it is gone, right? And so with that, are there any ways, like, because this is a selfish question for me, trying to see what I can learn as well.
Yeah.
Outside of the TFSA, RRSP, maybe permanent life insurance, are there any other products or ways that you can go about that?
That's a good question. There's also something called an open non-registered account. Now, that typically deals with things such as like crypto, like you mentioned a little bit about stocks. Now, the thing about that is you pay 50% on the profit. Now you're saying it's a lot higher, of course. That capital gains tax is still there. So if you're in a position where you're looking to save money on a tax-free basis, the best strategies is number one, TFSA. Well, I would actually say number one is permanent life insurance. And then number two, backing that up with a tax-free savings account as well. But that's if you're looking to have tax advantages and get it on a tax-free basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I want to pivot. You talked about basketball, sports. I see here a beautiful poster by Kobe. What does this mean to you?
So I'll be transparent. For the longest time, I mean, that debate of like Kobe, LeBron. I'm a LeBron guy. I love LeBron. Michael Jordan's my number one.
Me too.
1,000%. But I believe when it comes down to Kobe, I mean, he's like a mirror of Michael Jordan. So I have to respect his game. But one thing that I learned about him as time was going by is how much of a business person he was. Because he took the mentality that he had from sports and he applied it to the business world, and he started to become very successful there. Unfortunately, obviously, he passed away. But this poster specifically means, you know, he put his all into his craft, and it was kind of like day in, day out, non-negotiable. When he started basketball, he never said, I'm going to do basketball depending on how I feel. He said, I'm just going to play basketball. And so whether he was hurt, whether he played, whether he was sick, whether he wasn't, he made sure that he put his all on the floor every single time. So he wrote pretty much a letter saying, "Dear basketball," and in a few paragraphs pretty much described what it meant to him. And so you can see through the letter.
I'm just seeing that right now. It's a love letter to basketball.
Pretty much.
Wow.
So you can see through that. Now, I didn't play basketball. I played soccer. So it's not like I can relate on a basketball level, but I can relate in terms of my craft. If I put my all into my craft, I make it non-negotiable, it could ideally end up becoming the love of my life because it can support the lifestyle that I want to live.
It's a mentality.
1,000%.
I believe Kobe, like the thing that people resonated with him the most was the mentality that he had. He had that Mamba mentality, that killer instinct. And a lot of people take that into life and business. Okay, so a lot of technological advancements, right, happening. AI, blockchain, all of that. And a lot of people are worried of being replaced, this ever-changing world, and what type of skill sets and values, right, that they're going to need to have in order to stay relevant. So what are some things maybe you're doing or your industry's doing to be AI proof?
Very good question. I believe for myself specifically, what I can say, the reason as to why I'm not necessarily concerned about AI is because I know that what I do on a day-to-day when it comes to helping people isn't something that's programmed. Every single day is different. So somebody may need help with debt. Somebody may need help properly protecting themselves. Somebody may be just looking for an opportunity to save. And so because it's very dependent on their situation, maybe how much money they're making, the demographic, where they live, all these things play into a factor. So I'm not necessarily concerned because I know that that's something that you can't necessarily put in a computer and it just gets done. For people that may be concerned, I think it's a common concern. When I used to work in the kitchen, that was something that they spoke about a lot because it's very robotic. It's kind of like same thing, different day. So it's easy to be replaced in that realm. I feel for like somebody that's in that predicament where they feel like they're maybe a little bit concerned. Again, finding a niche that's not something that can just be digitalized. It's something that's pretty unique. So it can be sales. It can be some sort of entrepreneurship. It can be even something as simple as personal training. I don't necessarily think a robot can, personally train somebody because it comes down to, again, their weight, their goals. Do they want to put on muscle? Do they want to lose fat? All these things come into play. So that's what I would say. For somebody that's concerned about that, find a niche that can't necessarily be digitalized.
Awesome. So we're coming to the end of the podcast. Going to wrap up soon. But before we do that, I want to ask you, what is your message to the world? If you had one final thing to say, what would you leave the world with?
Two things. Is it cool if I do two parts to it?
Of course.
All right, cool. The first thing that I would say is we go through life and life has its ups, it has its downs. And oftentimes we mistake the things that we're going through as something that's happening to us, not for us. Now, there's an analogy of like planting and burying. And I mentioned this a couple months ago, something that stood out to me that I listened to. And what you'd find is the same motion of planting something versus burying something is the same. It's the same motion. Ideally, what do? You dig up the dirt, you plant or bury whatever it is, and then you conceal it. Now, the difference between planting it is that you're pretty much putting something in the ground so that it could rise up through the top eventually. When you're burying something, it's stuck. Oftentimes, I feel like as people, when we go through life, we mistake if we're being planted or being buried. And we haven't identified where we're at in life yet. That's number one. Number two, to that message is I'm a spiritual guy. Oftentimes I ask God for something. So like, for example, God, make me more patient. Something as simple as that. Because a lot of the people that know me know that sometimes my patience runs a little bit thin. We think that God's going to show it to us in a way where it's just going to happen with a snap of a finger. But God's actually going to send us scenarios that's going to make us patient. And we got to identify if it's life hitting us or if it's just that test. So patience can be something as simple as somebody upsetting you and you have like a short fuse. God's going to send you that individual that's upsetting you to see how you handle that patience. That's your test. So if you're able to get through that, at the end of that test, you will then have more patience. So I think the first part of the message is, one, identify whether you're being planted or being buried. And when you ask God for something, I want you to look very hard at what it is that's happening around in your life. And oftentimes he's actually sending that to you and answering your prayer. So that's something that stood out to me over the course of the last year, where I've asked for a lot of things and I thought maybe it would have just happened. Like, for example, I want to get fit, but there's work that has to go behind that. There's evidence that needs to be shown, and you got to leave room for now God to work with you.
That's powerful, very powerful message. And so I don't think there's any better way to end it than on that note. Thank you so much.